Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. I'm Brian, and welcome to episode 20 of the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from our massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Today's episode is the first of a doubleheader focused on OpenStack. Today, joining us is Jonathan Bryce of Rackspace and the OpenStack project. Jonathan, great to have you on this morning. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it. So, before we jump into anything about what's going on with the OpenStack conferences in Boston next week or the news around the latest release, for anybody who's not intimately familiar with OpenStack, can you give us a quick, actually, you know what? That's not a very good lead-in. Give us some background on yourself.
Sure, yeah. So my background is as a developer. I started doing development, specifically web development, in around 1995, and eventually ended up working at Rackspace on a bunch of different projects there. Started a little company with one of my coworkers that we brought back into Rackspace and launched what eventually became Rackspace Cloud, along with an acquisition that Rackspace made of a company called SliceHost. And so I've been doing development and cloud infrastructure for quite a while. You know, I've been involved with OpenStack since the beginning, since we got it kicked off last year. And now I'm sitting on a ranch in the middle of nowhere in Texas.
So you're sort of the CTO or the lead for the OpenStack project, correct?
Well, I work on a lot of community organization pieces of it. I chair the project policy board, which is one of the governance boards for the OpenStack project, and I work with a lot of the companies in the community who are either deploying OpenStack or who have developers working on it. You know, the way that the project is set up itself, a lot of the technical leadership is concentrated within the individual projects. There's a project technical lead for each of the projects who's really kind of the owner of the project, and then it's a very collaborative process for how features get in and how those features end up being implemented. Okay,
cool. So I think a lot of people are familiar with OpenStack from sort of conceptually. It was something that, like you said, Rackspace had started through either some acquisitions or some things they were doing internally. You guys created a partnership initially with NASA to, sort of find not only an initial customer, but an environment that was open to sort of open source ideas, had a big enough problem to go try and experiment around fixing. Where is OpenStack? Where's the project today? What's going on with it at a high level?
We kicked off OpenStack last year in collaboration with NASA. It was in July of 2010. And at the time, it was something that was focused on the compute and storage infrastructure components of cloud computing. And so that was a code that NASA had been developing for an infrastructure cloud they were building for the government to use and for scientists to use, as well as code that we had from our cloud products. There was a compute product and a storage product similar to Amazon's EC2 and S3. Ours are called Rackspace Cloud Servers and Rackspace Cloud Files.
Okay.
And those projects were really the initial foundation of it. Over the past year, it's grown in an amazing way, a lot more than I think I expected. But it's been awesome to see how many people have gotten involved, how many companies have gotten involved, and developers. And the thing that's been really neat is that since that kind of beginning of just a couple of very focused ideas, the project has expanded to really kind of take on the problem of how do you automate everything in a data center in a really scalable way, put an API on the storage, the compute, the networking in your data center, and build this cloud operating system that service providers or enterprises can use to change the way that they deliver technology to their users.
Okay. So the original projects were the compute project, which I think was called Nova, correct?
Yep.
You've got the storage project, which is called Swift.
Right.
There's the images project, which is called Glance, and then there's a bunch of new ones that are coming in this latest release, which is called Diablo, correct?
Right. Yeah. So the Diablo itself has those three core projects as part of the release. One of the things that we started during the Diablo release cycle was a project incubation process. So as the scope has expanded and as users and developers have seen areas where we need a new piece of technology or a specific type of software, some of them have kicked off projects and they want those to become part of the core of OpenStack. So in Diablo, we started an incubation process And we had two projects that entered incubation during Diablo. One was the dashboard, and the dashboard is a web-based interface for managing OpenStack clouds. So you can log in as a user, you can see your resources, you can start up virtual machines, you can manage the storage, you can control networks, all of these kinds of things. Or if you are the cloud operator, if you're the administrator of the cloud, you can go in and see an overall picture of your cloud, how healthy it is, how many resources are deployed across it, how much capacity you have, who has access to it, what kinds of services they can provision, all of these kinds of things. So that was something that was launched as an incubated project during the Diablo release cycle. That will be in our next release as a full core project. It's now been accepted for our Essex release. It's going to come out in about 6 months, and it will be a core part of it.
Okay, so you have, if I'm understanding this right, so you'll have a sort of experimental that will get into a release. You'll let the community go out, work the bugs out of it, figure out some of the nuances, and then the goal is to sort of make it official in that next release, right? Is that kind of the cycle of? Okay, cool.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just about the software itself, but we also want to make sure that the project has a level of development maturity, that there are enough developers to support it on an ongoing basis, and that there's some process around how it accepts the patches. Okay. And puts out the software at the end of the day.
Okay. So new dashboard, and the new dashboard will manage just a single, sort of a single instance of OpenStack, or can it look across multiple? If an organization has things running in Rackspace Cloud or running on top of AWS, can you look across multiple clouds, OpenStack instances?
Yeah, this dashboard is meant specifically to point at an OpenStack instance.
Okay.
and control that. There's actually another project that some of the community members are working on that is meant to kind of be a master dashboard across different clouds, and including even different providers who may not even be running OpenStack.
Okay, so we were talking about that, and then you were talking. I think you were going to jump into what are the other sets of sort of experimental projects that are
yes.
That are in this?
So the other project that was incubated during Diablo is OpenStack Identity, and its code name is Keystone.
Okay,
and Keystone came about as the number of projects in OpenStack started to grow. They all had a slightly different way of doing authentication, and none of them really wanted to build out an authentication system. And the question is, well, really what we want to do is tie into existing authentication stores, and we want to do it in a way that's unified across all of OpenStack. So the OpenStack Identity project was kicked off to answer that need. And what it does is it layers OpenStack cloud concepts on top of something like an Active Directory. You can basically get the multi-tenancy that you need. You can get the identity that you need to do API calls to say, you can have 10 servers, I can have 5 servers. Those kinds of things that are not just inherent in a username password store. But without the thing that the Keystone team didn't want to do is they didn't want to try to replace LDAP or Active Directory.
Okay.
They wanted to write something that sits on top of a backend like that. And so that's what that project does. And it allows you to basically, if you have an existing authentication store, to cloud enable those users so that they can get access to any of the resources in your OpenStack cloud. They can log into the dashboard, they can provision virtual servers, they can store data.
Okay. And then there's also a networking experimental project. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. So there's a networking project that just got incubated. It's called Quantum, and Quantum is one of a number of networking projects that are out there. It's the first one to kind of enter an official status, and it's led by Nicira and Cisco and Mitokura, a company over in Japan, with involvement from Citrix and Rackspace as well. But the point of it is to do layer 2 networking to enable a lot more of the capabilities that enterprises and network administrators are used to that aren't necessarily present when you just have kind of a virtualized environment. Especially in the earlier versions of OpenStack Compute, networking was just a subcomponent of that, and the focus of it was really about taking traffic and getting it to a virtual machine versus building richer topologies and being able to tie in features like quality of service controls, being able to hook in things that were not virtual devices like intrusion detection systems or physical routers and switches or firewalls and load balancers. and build these topologies where you're doing more advanced routing and networking connections. So Quantum is basically an API that allows you to create networks, to add connections on those networks and links, and then it lets you actually pick what is being driven behind the scenes. It could be virtualized networking, like what you might currently be using in a virtual environment, or it can actually tie into a lot of physical network gear as well. And so it's really cool to see how this is coming together, because you're going to get to the point with OpenStack in a pretty short time frame where you can control compute in a very robust and scalable way. You can control all of the networking that's going on in your data center, whether it's virtual or not. You can control different types of storage, and get to a point where everything in your data center can be managed through a single point of entry with tools that are either open source or commercially based. It gives you a lot of control and a lot of visibility into what's going on.
Okay, that's cool. So it feels like with this release, so the Diablo release, which came out last week, the sort of fourth release, the D release, it feels like a lot of things are starting to evolve out of some of the original releases. So I know, like when we sat down for a few minutes at VMworld, and you were talking about, well, the original compute project had some basic storage functionality, had sort of a nice SCSI stack to do basic block storage, but that's now evolved to things like Swift. You've got basic networking in Nova that's now evolving to Quantum. You've got some how do you manage some things around those resources is starting to evolve. Is that a normal progression for kind of a big open source project where you've got this core baseline thing, people start looking at it and they go, it's probably not going to scale for where I want to go, and it evolves out of those things? Is that pretty normal progression, evolution?
I don't know. I've been involved in a fair number of open source projects and watched many more, and it's been a very interesting progression with OpenStack. It's really just kind of shot out of the gate and taken off like nothing I've ever seen before.
Okay.
And I think that there's a lot of demand for this kind of technology, this approach to technology right now. A lot of people this year have been talking about the consumerization of IT and consumer-driven IT and that kind of thing. And I think that with OpenStack being a pretty open and accessible community with a lot of involvement from a number of different vendors, it's really kind of accelerated that. And I think that it's become this point of rallying for a lot of different people who want to see an open alternative for this type of technology. I think certainly getting people like Nicira and Cisco. Cisco is obviously a leader in networking technology. Nicira is a startup and doing some really cool advanced networking stuff.
Yep.
Getting them pumped and involved and ready to lead this project is a great thing. And you mentioned storage. We have a number of storage companies, similar kind of mix of enterprise companies and startups like SolidFire, who are getting involved because they see this as a way to really get a baseline of technology down, and that can plug into their products and that can give their customers a higher level of control and do it in a way that's really very complementary to their business model. Yeah,
you're seeing, this is going to sort of lead to my next question, but you're seeing all these different stages of companies. You've got big companies like HP, which just announced the beta of their cloud, or at least one of their cloud offerings, which is going to be based on OpenStack. Like you said, Cisco's involved, and then you've got startups involved, and then you've also got service providers like Rackspace and others who are driving this because they're either benefits their business model or they think it's going to help them down the road accelerate driving a new service or something. So yeah, it's a really interesting thing to see people, what their motivation is for being part of it, how they look at it as helping to accelerate a portion that maybe they didn't have expertise in or they didn't want to own. So like you said, a very, very interesting coming together of all these different resources. So kind of leads me to my next question. You've got something like 110 or so different companies, independent developers that are working on all this. How's this stuff all getting coordinated?
It's definitely a challenge, and it's something that we spend a lot of time thinking about. But again, it grew a lot more than what we expected. So we kind of had our plans for how the process would work. Back in the early days when it was a few dozen developers and 20 or so companies, and now, like you said, it's 110 plus. Several hundred developers. So we're constantly working on trying to make those processes work and scale. One of the things that we've done is when there's been something like dashboard or networking or different questions around storage or things like that, we try to make sure that where it makes sense to have different teams focus on different areas, so it's not doesn't get too mammoth, too much of a behemoth. One of the really critical things that we've been doing is we do these things, we call them design summits.
Okay.
And we have one next week in Boston, and it's basically a time where the development community comes together for a week and plans out what's going to happen over the next 6 months, what the next major release is going to look like, and we get together, and it's a very technical focus through the whole summit. It's implementation details. It's having debates about what the best way to do something is, whether this feature even needs to go in, these kinds of things. And so that process, I think, helps to get everybody together and get on the same page about things. It's something that we took a page out of Ubuntu's book. They do the Ubuntu Design Summit for a similar goal. And then I think, we just try to stay in close contact with everybody who's involved and make sure that, I think the thing about this, what we're trying to build, it's a very baseline piece of technology that most of the participants feel should be freely available, like the Linux kernel.
Okay.
And if we get it right, then there's lots of room for everybody involved to make money, to have businesses, to be successful, to build cool technology on top of it. I think that's one of the things that has held the community together and helped everybody to stay focused. The opportunity for cloud and for this type of technology over the next decade or two is enormous. And so if we can keep that in mind and just remember how huge this is, what we're really working on, I think it helps to put things in perspective and keep us all pulling in the same direction. And so far I think that's worked pretty well. But it's definitely a challenge and something that we take really seriously as part of our mission to maintain that.
Right. Yeah, we did a podcast with Rick Clark was one of the guests last week. So Rick, you obviously know Rick. Rick has been involved for a long time, and yeah, we were talking about how even though you have a ton of these things going on, you guys have been very consistent so far about every 6 months it's going to be we're going to get the release out on time. Whatever's working and available, we're going to get that out. You've got the events going on slightly after every 6 months. So yeah, I mean the level of transparency, the level of consistency, I think probably brings a lot of credibility and helps deal with any concerns people have about is this going to continue? Is the community going to behave properly? I think you see things like somebody like HP, who obviously huge company who's going to put financial backing behind it, is out there saying we're going to make a public service out of that. So that's, I mean, while Rackspace as a company may have different opinions on that, I mean that's probably got to feel good for you guys to go, other people are putting not only their developer resources, but they're actually building some businesses around that stuff. That's got to be encouraging to say, hey, it's making progress, it's out there, let's see what keeps happening.
Yeah, I think again, when we kicked this off, we were thinking about it mostly from the perspective of what we were using this software for, and who else might want to use it like this. And then to see how startups are getting funded, big companies are getting involved and building teams around it and launching services, and it's cool to see that there's a whole set of people. I mean, it's really a community in the thousands now.
Yeah.
who believe in this and believe that it's an important piece of the overall technology landscape and want to see it succeed.
Very cool. So the things going on in Boston, there's both a design summit and a conference, and there's some overlap to them. What's the difference between the two? I know I was out for the one in San Jose in the springtime, and it felt like there was a portion of it that was people there to sort of be educated, get some I know eBay spoke, for example, so giving people a sense of how big a problem are we taking on, what challenges do big companies and little companies have. So there was an education piece. There's a lot of people there just trying to wrap their heads around what this means. And then, like you said, there's a very hardcore set of people. I mean, literally people talking design details and people almost, it looked like writing code in the audience. How are the two things separated? What all would somebody expect to get out of being up in Boston next week?
Yeah, so you're right. There are kind of two separate parts to it. The Design Summit part is the highly technical session, and you're right. Code gets written in the audience and on the screen, and people come with with detailed ideas to present and hash through, and it's very detailed. The conference portion is more of the more based around users and potential users who want to understand OpenStack, who want to see how other people are using it. We have a number of users who are there. There are going to be talks from CERN, the research agency over in Europe, Mercado Libre, a big e-commerce company in South America. There's a panel that Disney and Wikimedia and others are going to be on, and so it's something where people can come and they can really get an understanding of, okay, what is this thing? I heard a lot about it.
Right.
What do you actually do with it? And find out also, what the outcome of the design summit was, and get a peek at what the next 6-month roadmap is going to look like. One of the things that we are doing differently this time is we've kind of switched the order. Last time we did the conference first and then the design summit. Yep. But a lot of the questions that we got at the conference were, what's going to be in the next release? And we said, well, we don't know yet. We'll know in 3 days. So this time we decided to do the design summit first, so that we'd have the results of some of those discussions to present to users. And the other thing that we tried to do is the last design summit and conference were totally overbooked, and it actually got a little unruly and a little bit difficult to coordinate and make useful for everyone. So we put some limits in place this time around on just how many people could be there, to try to make sure that all the discussions were productive, and I think we'll keep playing with the formula until we get it right. Yep. It's another one of those things where it's grown so much that we've got to figure out what the right approach for all of these different things are in managing this community.
Right. Now, will any of the sessions be recorded or streamed, or is there a way for people that can't get up there to take in some of the details, or?
That's a good question. I know that we were talking about recording them and publishing them. I don't know what the state of that is, but I'm pretty sure that there's going to be some way to get access to the results. One of the things that we actually do during most of these discussions is we use Etherpad, which is like this real-time web-based editing thing.
Okay.
And so if you attended any of those technical sessions, there was probably an Etherpad screen that was projected up on the wall. Mm-hmm. And then people in the audience would be logged in and would be making edits and kind of taking notes collaboratively together. And what was interesting too is to see that there would even be people who were who weren't there present in the room, who were on the Etherpad and participating in the discussion that way as well.
Oh,
so
cool.
we do try to make sure that the information is available as quickly as possible, and for as many people as we can.
Okay. Yeah, and and for anybody listening, it's a different conference, at least trying to take it all in than maybe you see at some of the big kind of vendor conferences like a Oracle Open World or a VMworld or something, where it's like big keynotes, sessions that are typically one person. These are super interactive. There was more. It was sort of like bees swarming around a hive. So yeah, it probably is a little bit tricky to stream them or send them out. But yeah, if you guys are doing some stuff where it's got notes, or even the things that I know some of the media companies do where they're interviewing people as the week's going on, those are useful and helpful. So check those out. And they're all typically they're off the OpenStack.org page, or if you look on YouTube, people have got them posted pretty quickly. So that's very cool. So OpenStack is one of several open source cloud management, I hate to put a tag on it, but sort of cloud management projects going on these days, right? So Cloud.com obviously does some things, Eucalyptus, Red Hat's starting this thing called Overt. How do you guys, in the OpenStack community, how do you view those? Do you view those as semi-competitive in terms of trying to take up developer resources, or do you look at it as it's great to see more and more people getting behind this idea of some form of open cloud and interoperability between clouds?
I think that there are different levels of the stack and different pieces of it that it's very complementary. I think some of them are competitive as well, and I think that's just a result of how much interest there is in this space. Over time, I think that there will be consolidation and there will be leaders that emerge. I expect that if we continue to make the progress we have in the past year at OpenStack, that it'll be the leader in this kind of open source cloud management space. Yeah. I think there are a lot of interesting aspects to looking at higher up the stack platform services and relational database services and other areas that OpenStack isn't really playing in right now. I don't know if over time it'll expand in that direction, if the community wants to go that way or not. But I think the thing that we are really focused on is building this fundamental compute, storage, networking management that's really, really scalable and that works with the systems that we hear our customers want, which means it's generally more commodity or being able to leverage existing investments versus having to go buy a whole new storage and compute stack and tie it into expensive networking gear.
Okay.
Cloud is supposed to be about lowering costs and operational costs and being able to get more out of your hardware, and that's where our entire focus is. And so I think that if you look at some of the other projects, they focus more on different aspects and so I think so early too that we'll see how it shakes out. But I expect that there will probably be more over the
Sure.
near term and fewer over the long term.
Right. Well, and that's natural, right? Anytime you have, like you said, you've got a market that long term is potentially very large in size, profitable, lucrative. You're going to have a lot of people in there doing their thing, and then over time, it's like any set of ecosystems or any competitive environment. I mean, typically you're going to find a couple of winners and a lot of others that either merge in or fail. So okay, so it seems it's sort of a normal evolution of where we're going. You guys are obviously 2 years into the project. You've got a huge number of companies that are sort of backing it in various ways, so that's obviously a good thing. If you're sitting around 2 weeks from now, so the conference is over, Diablo's out, you guys have a roadmap for Essex, the fifth release. How do you start to measure success?
Well, I think at the end of the day, we build software so people will use it.
Okay, sure.
and so I think that's the phase that we're entering now. The first year was really about getting the software ready, getting it to a point that it could handle the kinds of workloads that it was meant for. And I think that especially with Diablo, we've accomplished a lot on that front, and it's totally ready for a large number of workloads. There's still some that it's not going to be perfect for. But I think that that it's really come a long way, and it's ready to be deployed and used. So I think that if you look out over the next year, for me, I think the biggest measurement of success is around usage and deployments. I think another one is what we talked about earlier, which is maintaining this strong community that's pulling in the same direction and accomplishing a lot and getting a lot of stuff done. I think those are two big areas of success for it. If we can continue to, we already have some great user stories, and if we can continue to build out those users, then we get to a point where we end up with a large footprint of OpenStack clouds all around the world, and that becomes a really valuable ecosystem. We've seen that with Amazon, where they have a very large footprint and they have a lot of customers, and it draws in innovation and technology companies who are building to their stack and to their APIs, and I think that as the usage continues to ramp on OpenStack, that's the result that we'll see as well. We'll see this ecosystem that we've already started to see. We'll see it continue to blow up and explode, and we'll have a ton of innovation happening, not just inside of the OpenStack projects themselves, but in companies around OpenStack that are building hardware and software and services to make OpenStack clouds more valuable, to make them fit better into specific verticals, and to do just to add a lot of value on top of that core technology.
Okay, very cool. So it's build a community, get people using it, and then let it sort of expand itself around where the innovation goes, whether it's in product, whether it's in new kinds of services, or it's really just people deploying it more and more. One last question, and I'll let you go because I know you're probably extremely busy trying to get wrapped up before next week. When you look at whether you call it successful or expansion of the community or whatever, do do you need to see enterprises and governments deploying OpenStack in their environment as well as out in the service provider and cloud providers, or do you expect to see sort of the early deployments in the providers' clouds because they've got the resources available? There's not all this time of setup, or
yeah, I think a lot of the earliest deployers of OpenStack were service providers who service providers are kind of better suited for the early days of it. That a lot of times they have existing control panels and customer systems, and they need an engine that plugs into that, which is kind of how OpenStack started. If you look at some of the changes that have come along with like the dashboard, with the identity system, with the networking improvements and other updates that are in the recent releases, then I think that what you find is that a lot of those have actually come from feedback from enterprises as we've gone in and done some enterprise deployments. And we at Rackspace, we help people deploy it. We have a services organization that does that. We have a number of customers, and I think we're going to be able to talk about some of them coming up pretty shortly, who are doing these kinds of enterprise deployments. I think that it's really critical to get those, because the real value of having a common stack that's widely available is being able to have it internally and externally. Being able to run Linux servers in your own data center and go get Linux servers from Rackspace and go get Linux virtual machines from Amazon. Being able to have that common platform is really powerful, and one of the things that enterprises really look for. I think that same kind of model where you're able to run OpenStack internally at a variety of OpenStack providers in Colo, wherever you might need to deploy it, is going to be a huge part of the value of OpenStack over the long term.
Very cool. Well, listen, I want to thank you so much for your time. I know, obviously, you're going to be, I would assume, up in Boston for all the different conferences and developer events next week.
Yep.
Anywhere else people can find you, either on the web, blogging, or events throughout the rest of the year?
I don't even know what my schedule is. So, yeah, Boston for sure. Potentially, let's see, what's coming up? Cloud Expo. I'm sure there's going to be a Cloud Expo soon, and I don't know what else, but yeah.
Okay, very cool. Well, again, thank you so much for your time. Folks, we're out of time this week. You can follow us on Twitter at thecloudcastnet, or you can reach us at thecloudcast.net on the web. You'll find links to the show and show notes. We'll post all the details around the conference next week. You can leave us a comment, send us an email, stream us on Stitcher. So, Jonathan, thanks so much for your time, and thanks to everybody for listening.